For those who don't know much about MASS LBP, it's an organization that was founded almost 14 years ago. And we sometimes joke that we are the unexpected love child, this is a very nerdy joke, admittedly, of the Ontario and BC Citizens' Assemblies on electoral reform. Not that many people even recall now that in 2004 and 2006, both provincial governments did something very unusual and very inventive when they decided to examine whether Canada or those provinces should change their electoral systems from first past the post to a proportional representation. Instead of creating a royal commission of blue ribbon experts, they instead sent out letters to randomly selected households and asked people if they would be willing not just to come out to a town hall meeting or fill out a survey, but whether they would be willing to spend as many as 20 weekends, practically half a year, learning about different voting systems and how they're used in different parts of the world, deliberating, and as a group of more than 100 citizens coming to an agreement amongst themselves, and then speaking with one voice to government. I had the great fortune to be involved with the Ontario Citizens' Assembly and saw firsthand not only how powerful, but in fact, how transformative that kind of civic interaction can be. Of course, those people who follow this particular branch of Canadian politics will know that we didn't enact electoral reform in either province, and that would be the subject of a whole other half hour. But to my mind, the real innovation was less the recommendation than the assemblies themselves. And in the 14 or so years since 2006, MASS has been working to take many of those same principles and put them to the service of many disparate policy issues in Canada. Over the course of that period of time, we've conducted more than 40 reference panels and civic lotteries. 1 in 35 Canadian households, I think at this point, have received an invitation to participate. And for the longest period of time, we have had a kind of inner prohibition, I guess, about really trying to sell anybody on what we've been doing. We had as a kind of mantra that we wanted to show, not tell. And showing meant that we would keep doing the work again and again and again, and working the health system and working in transportation, infrastructure, land use planning, other aspects of governance, and just applying the same set of principles and demonstrating their utility. I'm very happy to report to you that perhaps the greatest impact of this work isn't found in Canada, but actually in Europe, where the OECD has been documenting what they call the deliberative wave. More than 300 different deliberative processes that broadly follow the BC and Ontario precedents, and which have been in part influenced by some of our work here in Toronto. I know a lot of organizations have had the chance to pause and reflect during what has been a tremendously difficult year. For us, we thought it was a good occasion to try and consolidate what we had been learning with the more than 1,500 Canadians who have served in these processes. And that's why we decided to create a course called Working with the Public. Now, you'll notice it's not called Public Engagement 101. It's not called Public Consultation. Here's what you need to know. And that's because, frankly, I think the idea of working with the public better captures the ethos of what we have been trying to do here at MASS. Working with the Public is a 7-module course, which we're offering 3 or 4 times each year. It's only 1 hour every Tuesday, and so we've tried to make it really quite easy to slip into what I know are often very busy timetables. And it is intended as a resource to people working largely in the public sector or possibly practitioners. We've had a number of architects already take their courses. Those working in a broader public domain where they may find themselves frustrated with many of the pitfalls of public consultation and the ways in which too much of our efforts to engage the public can feel like a bit of a make work exercise or a tick box exercise. So we've tried to make it valuable to people who are commissioning these projects and also to people who are tasked with delivering them. These aren't modules exclusively focused on deliberation, because of course deliberation and citizens' assemblies, as I've just described, as important as they are to our work at MASS, is only one expression of a set of principles for creating better interactions between citizens and government. Many of you may be familiar with IAP2's spectrum and how it moves from a view of informing people ultimately to co-creating with them. We think there's a lot that's valuable about that spectrum, but in this course we present an alternate account, and we start by first getting clear on what the public is and isn't. Perhaps one of the most misused and abused terms in the English language. After all, I've spent all this time ostensibly working with the public. Trouble is, I'm just not sure I've ever met it. And that's because what we're all doing is actually creating publics together. When we issue a call for people to come and tell us what they think or have a hand in making a decision, how you create the circumstances by which constructive and productive publics emerge is really the focus of the course. So rather than thinking about a spectrum from informed to engaged, what we think about is a dyad, how we have a latent tendency to treat the public as a risk rather than as a resource. And so we discuss some of the controlling behaviors that governments quite reasonably employ when they view elements of the public as a risk to be managed rather than a resource to be tapped. And then we talk about some of the ambivalent behaviors of government, where it doesn't feel that there's an obligation or a pressing need to engage the public in a substantive way. And then most importantly, of course, we talk about the resource side of this. If the public is to be a resource, then we don't want to be extractive. We don't want to deplete that resource. We actually want to nourish it. So we talk about some of the behaviors and practices and techniques that we employ to try and build that public capacity up. At the end of the day at MASS, we believe that the problem isn't that we ask too much of people, it's that we've been asking them far too little. And that people, when offered the chance not only to have a say, but to serve, are more than happy to step forward. So in the 7 modules, and the last thing I'll say, we're really interested in participants who, whether you're new to public engagement practices or very well experienced, we want people interested in taking a different view of the public and perhaps bringing with them a case study or a project that they're interested in workshopping. This is a great way for any of our participants to get a lot of one-on-one interactions with both myself and my colleague, Lori Drake. We're happy to help workshop some of the challenges you may be facing and adjust aspects of the course to address the concerns. We have several modules starting this autumn. The thing that I've been most delighted about from our first course this spring is that we've been invited this summer, in fact, it began just on Monday, to teach a whole cohort of Norwegians who are really interested in applying some of this work to the municipality of Oslo and Stavanger, as well as a number of civic organizations there. So it's a course that's starting to have legs. I think the reviews have been very positive. People have found that it has been an energizing and, in fact, I think inspirational experience, especially at a time when quite reasonably we're all feeling a bit run down. So I'm going to stop talking at this point. I'd be grateful for anybody to ask any question you might have, whether it's very prosaic about, the cost, the timing, other elements of what you might hope to learn, or if you're interested in asking a question more broadly about public engagement or the work we do at MASS, I'm all ears. We've got about 15 or 20 minutes, so I will turn it over to whomever would like to speak up first. It's Tuesdays at noon for 1 hour. And typically it's about a 40-minute presentation lecture, about 20 minutes of conversation. And it's often broken up into two smaller cohorts. So it's a kind of, generally we're trying to cap it at around 15 to 20 people. So there's a good occasion for interaction. There is some work to be done between the modules, and that's really about consolidating what's being learned, and then some peer responses. And we get everybody enrolled in Slack. and use that as a platform for each of the work groups to review materials and to discuss their own case studies. Thanks, Dan. Some of our most inventive projects have actually been about what some people might regard as slightly mundane regulatory matters. For instance, we worked with the Ontario Financial Services Regulatory Authority to take a very close look at some of the regulations pertaining to automobile insurance in the past autumn. And we've also worked with the Ontario government many years ago when it wanted to overhaul the regulations pertaining to the governance of condominiums and some of the insurance matters there. So we try and tailor the case studies that we use to whomever happens to be in which cohort. And knowing that was an interest or concern for you, we would try and be responsive. I suppose I would say that some of the theory behind the work, doesn't always need to find expression in really grand consultation activities. It can be as simple as being more disciplined about what it is you're trying to learn through a consultation. Often the questions are a bit pro forma, and often the consultations occur quite far down the sort of policy pathway. And it's one of the things we talk about is finding ways to try and move various kinds of stakeholder and public input further upstream. I think as I'm sure very sophisticated public servant, you appreciate that the stage of problem definition is actually the most fertile, and that sets the course for the likely policy solutions. But often there's very little input from outside of government and its expertise in that formative stage. And we talk about certain circumstances and recognizing the character of the problem or the question that is most amenable to, I think, more substantive public input. The course is intended more generally for people who are just interested in a different way of thinking about the public, get some new concepts, get some new language, and understand how different practices can be employed to create more productive publics. While we have a case study, obviously, on citizen deliberation, and we look at two of the reference panels and assemblies that we've run, it isn't a major focus of the course. We will be offering a masterclass on citizens assemblies, likely early in the new year. So if anybody's hoping to really just drill into that, know that it's in production and will be based on the work we're doing now with the Norwegians. Unless there are any other questions, I'll just say thank you to people for joining and your interest in our work. If there's any specific information you need, or again, you're interested in some sort of customized offering, please just drop Chris or myself an email and we'll be sure to follow up. Otherwise, I hope you have a safe, more than anything, a safe, but hopefully restful and a little bit of fun in what remains of August.